All right, welcome to the Strategic Insights Podcast. I am your host for today, Andrew Makl. I am lucky enough to be having today's show with someone I've known for coming up on, I think, 10 years now. This is what we're going to do, a little client showcase and QAD expert showcase. I have Sean Brown, the Director of Global IT from Somero, joining us today. How you doing, Sean?
I'm doing well, Andrew. Thanks for having me.
So I know this will cost me later for getting you to do this, and not necessarily short notice, but getting you to do it and just agreeing to it in general. But you know, as we've discussed over the years and on the different events we've been at, from user group conferences and so on, a lot of times there's missing elements. People always want to understand more about the industry, more about different roles people play in IT when supporting organizations in manufacturing and ERP. And I wanted to have you give a little bit of your background before we break into some questions. I think it's important that people understand that as we go through what the challenges are that you've seen your career and into your industry, you can talk about a little bit of background of how long you've been doing it and what you've seen. So if you can just give everybody a little background on who Sean is as the Director of Global IT and your background in the QAD and ERP space.
Sure, absolutely. I've been in the QAD space for going on 25 years. Before I was lucky enough to join Somero, I worked for a place called Layer Technologies. Worked there for roughly 15 years or so. Started out as an analyst, moved my way up through the ranks. Did ERP integrations, QAD integrations. What we did with Laird is we grew through integrations. We grew through acquisitions as well. So what we'd end up doing is we'd acquire a company and say they were running Epicor or Sightline or even SAP. We would acquire that company. A team would fly in all over the world, and we would learn what they did from the daily, and then we'd integrate them inside QAD. Ironically, that's how I learned QAD as well. I learned through an acquisition. I came from a smaller company in Laird, and they acquired me. We were an Epicor. And at the time, how I learned QAD is they flew in a team and integrated us. And then 3 weeks after we went live, that integration team left. And that left me to support roughly 7 sites. So I learned QAD on the fly, and it was challenging at the time because, as you guys know, with QAD, it's back, next, back to do an update on the screen. It's not very intuitive, but after you get it, it's almost like second nature. It was a lot of fun. After about a year of supporting those sites, the team at Laird realized what I was offering that team, and they put me into their IT umbrella. After that, I was traveling all over the world. I lived in a suitcase for probably 8 years doing integrations. And eventually I was working directly for the CFO and the CRO to help integrate and consolidate either sales networks to financial shared services. And I did that for roughly 4 years. I spent probably 6 months a year in China and going all over the world to integrate or to consolidate their networks. It was a lot of fun. It was very challenging. And ironically, probably about 9 years ago, I got married. And the first year of my marriage, my wife never saw me because I was traveling all the time. And she said, something's got to change. So at the time, really wasn't looking for anything, but somebody from SIG reached out to me and said, hey, I got an opportunity with a great company. And 8-9 years later, here I am with that company again. And my wife is much happier. I'm much happier. And here, the biggest challenges that I've had is I've had to build up the IT team from zero. They were all outsourced, and everything that we've done since then has been centered around QAD. And that is where we are still going today. QAD is our framework. QAD is the foundation which we built this company on. We have grown quite a bit over this time. I think when I first started, we were about 60 users worldwide. Right now, we're at about 107. So it is quite a challenge. I did it most by myself. Over the years, I have hired a team, both on network and the integration and the analyst team. So it's been quite a trip, but that's kind of my background in a nutshell.
You made a couple of really good points there, and I want to summarize it because there's not many people that I deal with that were, yeah, we all started different parts of industry, right? So we generally, no matter where we came from, like I was in operations when I started as well, but you were boots on the ground, traveling consultant for your own company, implementation person, road warrior. Which as your role has changed at your current position, and your staffing and you're rolling out where you used to be on the ground, now you're strategically having to come up with, the plan, the people, the timing. In my opinion, and working with you, it makes it easier because you understand the requirements that are put on those people. And I'm really glad that someone in our organization can, of course, help you and your wife out and figure that dynamic out, because mine did the same thing. So I totally get the travel requirement. But it's interesting, and that's why when I say expert, you also hit on the next back, right? So those that are listening to this that are all on new versions of QAD aren't blessed enough to understand that way back in the day, the user interface wasn't quite as intuitive as it is now, and you had to understand some, I would say, Frogger type techniques to go back and forward to get a screen to complete, right?
Right.
So, as we look at this, so you are currently, supporting in the direction of QAD at your organization. What have those challenges been like? Because you just talked about now you're staffing. Like before, it was you're living out of a suitcase, and now you're staffing and planning for the future. Give me a little bit on those challenges, because what were they like when you first landed when there were 60 employees, and what do they look like now?
Yeah, that's a great question, Andrew. There's been, I think the challenge, and there's been two major challenges, is anticipating the growth that we have seen, because it's almost impossible. And the other challenge is trying to translate what that growth means to a management level, so that I report into a C level, and trying to translate what their expected growth is going to be and what my needs are going to be related to those growth. One of the challenges that we've just had is over the next 3 years, the senior management team has come and said that they expect to see growth threefold over the next 3 years, which is pretty significant. And then I have to translate that. Well, how do we expect to handle that growth? One of the things that I've seen is, well, we need to work on our foundation. We were on a old version of QAD. It was 2014 SE, which is, as you guys know, is a archaic version. It's 2025. It's going to be unsupported. So while all the other senior managers are competing for initiatives that they want to do, say they want to do automation, say they want to do shop floor automation or some kind of better reporting, what I had to focus on was making sure that we had a foundation to do that. The only way I could foresee a decent foundation was to do an upgrade to EE, which is something we're in the process of doing right now.
And the interesting part there, so you're not only planning for your future of the organization, but you actually have to take every, I don't call him subject matter expert, but every departmental head, CFO, COO, and understand what their directives are to make sure that the platform's ready for when they decide they want to make these massive changes, right? So you're not only planning for your future, but you have to take everybody else's roadmap into consideration as you're building out your plans.
Absolutely, absolutely. Just to give you some ideas of what were presented to me, barcoding, shop floor automation, traceability, denied party screenings, and updated CRMs, and then online stores. So those are all initiatives they were presented to me. And while I love to integrate QAD and all that, because there's some great products out there, but I had to really focus on Do we want to do all these other initiatives, and then 3 to 5 years from now, when we don't have support on them, um, what's our next steps? Do we upgrade then? I was lucky enough to have a senior management team that listened to me and said, "All right, your vision makes sense because while we need to focus on these other ones, we need to work on our foundation first." And that's what Somero is all about. Somero builds floors for or builds machines to help companies succeed in their flooring, their foundations, and everything else. So I use that analogy to build my IT roadmap and my IT vision for this company.
That's a great analogy, considering obviously what your organization builds, and it is, I think, sometimes lost, right? So everybody wants to, here's my requirement for automation now, and you're saying that's great, but I have an end of life for, I mean, everybody's software does, right? So it doesn't matter if it's Microsoft or whatever it may be, you have to manage when you take updates and so on and so forth, and those have to be configured, considered as you look at that integration path. Now, that integration path leads me to another set of questions, because you have a deep knowledge in the QAD space about this, especially in the partner community, because you've used a number of partners. And when you're looking at that integration and how it fits, how do you make that decision? Are you interviewing everybody? Are you using your knowledge in the space? Like, what do you look for in that partner, and how do you start that search?
That's a great question, Andrew. I make a regular habit of attending the user group conference. I'm active within user groups. I think that's a key to see what new technologies are out there, because you have a chance for one-on-ones with those vendors, as well as you have a chance to see some success stories and hear actual users talk on some success. So I think that for me has been ultimate key on making sure that I have a deep knowledge. And then I have to take that knowledge and bring it back into my users, because often we have users that come and say, all right, I want to implement X, Y, and Z. And they already have a vision on what they want to do. And they already have, most of the time they have a vision on the software they want to use, because they've heard it from other people or other users, or they have even had salespeople. And for me to take what I know from the user groups and from partners like SIG and ISS, and to translate that to the users and to have them take a step back and say, what are your requirements? And then they take it at that granular level. Then we can take back and say, all right, we can do these platforms, and they're going to have the least amount of pain for you, and they're going to do exactly what you need. And by using those two and collaborating, my knowledge between it has allowed our team and Somero to have greater success in the integration platforms. We initially started out when I first joined, they were all customizations, no integrations, and over the 7 or 8 years, we've stripped out all the customizations, do strictly integrations now, and that helps with our upgrade path as well. And it also ultimately helps with QAD support. When I was at Laird, all they wanted to do was customize, and then as soon as we would pick the phone for support, they would say, all right, what program are you using? We give a program name is XXSOSONT.P, and they'd say that's customized program we can support. And that's understandable. But once we rip out those customizations and work on integrations, it helps us for our upgrade path. It also helps us for support. It makes us a better partner with QA.
Oh, absolutely. I think the part where you're talking about the integrations, right? It's easier to manage an integration than it is to manage a customized piece of software, because then we're just talking about bidirectional communication pieces, maybe an add-on or a wrapper, and your history of going from a very customized solution to a non-customized solution, as that's what we've been preaching the whole time. In the last at least 5 years, has been a very hard pill for some companies to swallow, because they want it exactly a certain way. And when you say, well, that's not best practices, or why do you want it that way? It takes somebody with your industry experience to push back on maybe someone in your department or someone in your organization and say, listen, you're asking for something that's not standard. Either we need to find a third-party product for it, or you have to give me a business case that makes it, legitimate why we should have to manage this type of risk. I'll give you credit because you're probably one of the better ones I've ever seen for it. I think the first time we ever had a conversation on requirements, you told me I want to hear challenges and I want to hear a requirements document, and then we can figure out if there's a product for it. I don't want to hear products before I understand what the requirements are.
Sure.
And I was like, that's the best I've heard in a while. Because a lot of times, like you said, you'll come in and they might have talked to somebody in industry, and they're like, "Hey, I need to hear about this. Third-party solutions can sit on top of finance and take care of all my problems." And I'm like, "Well, what problems do you have?"
Mm-hmm.
Right? It's almost like they want to know what the secret sauce is before they understand if they have a problem. So kudos to you in that direction, because it's a very hard cultural thing to change if you walk into an organization that's just used to getting whatever they want, and someone will write a custom piece of software for them. So
Absolutely. It's not only for my users. I've had to train my staff to do the same, because ultimately they want IT service relief, and having them to not just offer a solution based on what the users want, but to step back and say, all right, what is your ultimate goal here? And that's been a challenge internally for my staff as well as externally for the rest of the departments that we support.
awesome. Well, we're coming up to the top of our time here, and I want to cover a couple small topics. So we've really gone over like the history of the old version of the solution, customizations to the world of now of integrations, and how you've helped roadmap that out for your organization. I think that's key. I think we talked about the partnership and how you've kept your thumb on the pulse, or your finger on the pulse, if you will, at the user group communities and seeing new technology. And then, of course, I always like to ask two final questions. One, what do you see as the major challenges that are going to come forward? I mean, we went through the COVID piece, and now we're back to somewhat business as usual, supply chain issues. But what are the new challenges you see coming besides that 3x growth that you noted?
I keeping my finger on the pulse around AI right now. I think it's it's going to be trends, and it's going to continue to grow. And what we see now, within 5 years, 10 years now, with the growth of AI, with more and more AI taking over, that we need to watch that trend and see how that grows and how that changes our job, how that changes the industry, because it's not only going to change technology, it's going to change every industry related to it. Manufacturing is going to be key, because I think a lot more decision pieces are going to be made through software as opposed to people moving forward.
No, well said. And the speed of which that's going to happen is going to be the scary part and
Sure.
an interesting part as that moves forward. And then Sean, I'm lucky enough to call you a customer, a work colleague, and I do say expert because I laugh as we get into conversations on versioning and questions and technology that most people that sit in a corner and code all day have the knowledge base on, and we giggle over it. But as you look at partnerships, and obviously we have a pretty strong one, and we're excited to maintain and work with that going forward. How do you determine when you pick a partner? Because there are multiple people out there that do a lot of the same things, and some of us corner the market in different ways. But what's the one thing you look for in that partnership? Some people call it vendors, some people call it SAs, but what is the one thing you need to have in either that connection to the person and or that company to make it fit for you and Somero?
That's a great question, Andrew. A partner, like you said, there are many different partners out there. And I think sharing common goals and making the customer feel special. So those two things are something that I look for. Regardless of if it's 7 o'clock in the morning or 8 o'clock at night, being able to pick up the phone and call a person or individual, have them answer the phone when you have a problem, when you have an emergency. That's something that makes a strong partner, because that's exactly what my internal customers, my users do tell us. Friday night, I'm driving to Sarasota. It's like 7 o'clock, right before the 4th of July. And one of our users contacts me and says, "Hey, I can't get this reported." I'm pulling over on the side of the road and making sure that they can get the information. Granted, that could have waited, but that's not the support that we want to give our users. And that's not the support I want when I look for a vendor. So somebody who offers that same level of support is paramount for me.
That's awesome. And I'm glad that you point that out, because sometimes people have a unrealistic expectation of what the support should be from somebody that they're not willing to do themselves. So if you're holding us to that same accord and you're doing it, I'm excited for the partnership and the continued work that we'll do together. But Sean, thank you for your time today. Is there anything you want to say before we let you get back to your day, and you can text message me the guilty things that I owe you for this?
Oh, no. Andrew, it's been a pleasure as always. Thanks for your time today.
No, always there. And Sean, I enjoy the weather. I know this is the hottest part of the year where you can't hold it over my head. So I'm sure I'll talk to you soon and see you at the next user conference.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you.
Take care, sir.
You too.